So I'm actually not playing a major role today, but our two speakers are Dr. Takashi Ikegami and Dr. Suzanne Livingston from Tokyo and London, respectively. So I'll just briefly introduce them. Dr. Takashi Ikegami is a professor at the Department of General Systems Sciences at the University of Tokyo. And his research is on complex systems and the creation of artificial life. And he's published a number of books on related subjects. And he's also active in media arts and has had quite a few projects going on that front as well in recent years. And then our moderator today is Dr. Suzanne Livingston. She is a philosopher by training, and she is global principal at Wolf Ollins, developing strategy and exhibitions. She has done exhibitions with a number of major museums internationally, V&A, Whitney, ICA Boston, and so on. And she was the co-curator of the Barbican's exhibition AI More Than Human in 2019. And she also works with technology businesses, including Sony Worldwide, PlayStation, and so on. So that is my introduction. And without further ado, I'm going to pass straight on to Professor Takashi Ikegami.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming to talk. And thank you very much for inviting me to this fantastic event tonight. Now, Tokyo is 9 p.m. And I think London is almost 1 p.m., right? So 8 hours differences. Okay, so I'm going to talk about in between man and machine. That's I'm making a humanoid, and I try to make it closer human, but still there's a bunch of gaps between android and human. So that's I try to explain from my background about artificial life research and how we can go beyond just a mere machine, and then how we can go approach something real, living systems. And then so for the moderator that this foundation asked me whether I can explain what is artificial life is about. So in my terms, artificial life is about brain and evolution. If you open up your brain, that you don't understand what the mind is, and then evolution is too long to observe by yourself, right? So brain and evolution is something that we have to understand by doing some exceptional approaches to those themes. That's what artificial life has been doing more than 30 years now. And then I think artificial life is a better representation of real life than real life itself. Sometimes, like if you read a good novel, that tells you how the mind works, rather than just open up the brain, right? So the artificial life is a very good, I think I have to say, like a good metaphor for understanding what is life and what is evolution and how the mind works. One of the definition of, so I'm going to explain pick up one example of artificial life study, and then try to give you some taste of how the artificial life researcher is doing everyday life. Okay, so this is a simple illustration of what the cell division is. Like one is dividing into two, like this way. So that you can see that you have to think about the nuclear and DNA, and they're splitting in the same amount, and all this kind of biochemical details. In artificial life, we can skip it, but instead of that, we are using very simple equations on the chemical reactions, which is called Great Scott model, published in 1983. This is simply like a chemical U plus 2 molecules of chemical V makes 3 B molecules. And this molecule V is going to be, decaying into some, waste, which is, I just noticed, like P, right? So simply U plus 2V equal to 3V, and then V goes to waste. That's a simple equation, but by simulating this one in a computer, that you can see that 1 dividing 2 and goes into 2, x4, and then 8 cells emerges. Then it goes to 16, right? And this simulation is simply that you can run on Mac computer with a simple code like less than 50 lines of code. And of course, this one is initially invented by a mathematician called Alan Turing. Maybe you know this name because he's from Manchester, and then Alan Turing is famous for breaking the code Enigma, and he was the hero of in the movie called Imitation Game. Right? Cumberbatch was the main actor, which is also my favorite actor, and then he was actually played as Alan Turing. Right? And this pattern was on the wall. If you carefully watch the movie and just go into his room, and on the right wall, that you can see this old pattern, which we call Turing pattern. But anyway, so then from this Turing pattern that we, as for our work, that we put another chemical, U plus 2V equal to 3V, but V is also reacting with another chemical called W, and 2W makes 3W, and W goes to waste, right? And simply adding the third chemical that you can see, those ones are not just replicating, but they're moving around, right? So one of my claim is that life emerges in motion, right? Something that is moving spontaneously that creates life. So adding a third term is breaking symmetry, and then he has a head, he has a tail, and then moving, right? Which I thought was quite interesting. So you cannot get this one with the two chemicals, but once you put the third one, then you can have this interesting motion behaviors. So I'm kind of interested in how we can bring it to the real world, right? It's in a computer, right? So I I found a very good friend in Santa Fe, which is he's Martin Hanzik, and he's a biochemist. So I told him, say, Martin, I want to make something similar to my computer simulation that can move around in the space by just purely using chemical reactions. And he said, well, we can do that. And then we started to collaborate together. And then we quite lucky that found this simple molecule chemical reaction that generates this small little droplet, chemical droplet. It's undressing clothes and then moving, right? It's about 100 micrometers that you can just, this guy is not stay there, but just moving, right? So it's 2007 that I started to work on this, because this, to me, it's one of the things that I wanted to do, not just a computer simulation, but we can do the same thing in the real world. And this is another much simpler chemical reactions. And then also, we can also see this, like red one and white one. Everything is the same components with simple chemicals. But when you make a droplet, sometimes you do this, but sometimes you can do this, right? If you do this, then you can have this little chaotic black-red, a droplet, moving in rather chaotic ways. But another red ones, you can make it by just perpendicular to the surface, and then you can make this one. And this one is moving more regularly, and then bouncing each other. And the speed is also different, right? Depending on the initial configurations or some other effect. So even the same chemicals, but depending on how you make it, the behavior is going to be different. So this is how we can start study living systems without using any DNA or cells or any other bioorganic materials. So that was this one example. The other one is like making a robot. Of course, robot is very mechanical, moving systems without using chemicals, without using other things. But this one was, I think, originally studied William Gray Walter. He's also from London, I think, and he published 2 articles in Scientific American. The first one is Imitation of Life, and the second one was A Machine That Thinks. So these 2, Imitation of Life, Machine That Thinks, is actually the object of artificial life studies. Then, after like 50 years after, Rodney Brooks, that he made a very famous vacuum cleaner, but the autonomous robot, which is called Roomba. Right? This one I really like Roomba much. I really like Roomba than like a little dog robot or any other robots, because he doesn't care about me, but he has his own task to do, clean up the room, which I think is very interesting, because he has his own way to survive in the space. And when the battery goes up, then he go back to the charger, and then he coming back, right? So I have so one of my hero is Rodney Brooks, and then here is a short movie by himself. So can I play this? Can you hear this?
Robots are what I do. I like to build robots. I like to program them.
Yes, we can.
We can hear, yeah.
To me, a robot is something that's a machine, and it somehow senses the world. And then it computes, thinks about what the sensors tell it, and then it acts in the world.
For a number of years, building robots to operate in unstructured environments, we've been building them with 3 different levels of control. The primitive level, where the motors and sensors operate. A skills level, where they have basic sort of skills. And then a behavior level, which gives them behaviors like, going through a mountain pass, finding some dirt on the floor to clean up, etc.
No, you're not to do that. No. Not appropriate. No.
We are mechanism. If we are machines, then in principle at least, we should be able to build machines out of other stuff which are just as alive as we are.
So trying to make robots that are safe to interact with, so that ultimately doing stuff with us and partnering with us. This is going to be important in our old age. We're going to have more robotics help and assistance. We're not there yet, but I think we're making good progress towards it.
Okay, good. So he's one of the hero of this artificial life field, and one of his first paper is called Intelligence Without Representation. So in all the classic AI that people want to have like a list of garbages, right? So that you have to write this papers or something like that you have to write up. But of course the list can be infinite, so that you cannot pick up any of those garbages from the room. However, the Brooks is put inside out, means that if this robot can pick up something and absorb into his body, and that's the definition of garbage, right? You don't have to have the list, but once you interact with the environment, then you act something, and then you get something. Then that's the definition of things. So that's what he said. It's the representation is not inside the robot, but the environment itself is the representation of the world, right? So that's one of the most interesting principle at that time. So that the people try to make a robot in this based on this principle. Then, but 2002 or so, I think. So I mean, Rodney is my one of my old colleague, and he said, but those robots are different from living systems. It's apparent they are not living, right? So he posted this article in the Nature that says, what's going on? What's going wrong here, right? What's missing? So that maybe we might be getting a few parameters wrong, because sometimes the model has a huge numbers of parameters, and then the parameters can be wrong, right? Well, the complexity threshold, maybe the model is too simple. That we have to have a more complex models. Then we can make our living systems. Or maybe the computer power is not good enough to compute everything, right? Or as also my background in physics, that maybe we're missing something fundamental principle, like quantum mechanics or theory of relativity or chaos theory. That's the missing piece. But anyway, we still searching for this missing piece, and then I call it Brooks juice. So I invited Brooks to my conference in 2018, which I hosted, Artificial Life International Conference, and I asked him to be a keynote. And he said, so we are looking for Brooks juice, and he didn't know, did you call it Brooks juice? I said, yes. So Artificial Life is looking for Brooks juice. And then, wow, he said, so I made a small demonstration in this the place, so that he came into this place, and I said, hey, what's the Brooks juice? He doesn't know it yet, right? So we don't know it yet. But anyway, so the thing that we will have to understand is, what is Brooks juice, right? What is the Brooks juice? That's what I want to know. So the definition of artificial life, or a mission of artificial life, is, what is Brooks juice and where is it, right? So that's my simple introduction to artificial life. Okay. Then after, I don't know, maybe 20 years after Brooks published this paper, that I was invited to this Barbican Center in London. That was very interesting exhibition called AI More Than Human. And Suzanne was one of this organizers. Thanks to her, that this one was a technology that is able to teach itself, can endlessly surprise us with apparent creativity and its ability to see, hear, and move, right? And I like the theme, because that's exactly what I want to see, and I want to discuss, and I want to explore. So in 2016, we made a Android called Alter, right? Because this one, I started to collaborate with Hiroshi Ishiguro. He's famous for making his own Android. And then I showed him my oil droplet and other things, and he said, artificial life is very interesting, but people don't understand what you're saying because it's too abstract, too different from human beings. And he said, why don't you just use humanoid? Maybe your theory can be applicable to humanoid. So I said, yeah, you're right, maybe. Then I started to use this Android. I developed with him, and we named it Alter, A-L-T-E-R. So the Alter basically doesn't do anything, but he has many complex intrinsic dynamics, like chaotic oscillators, artificial neural network that is changing over time, and then also there's a say autonomous sensory network. He can sense humidity, he can sense temperature differences, he can sense ambient light, and then he can sense whether the people are close to him or not. Then his behavior changes over time. So here is the press came to me, like 80 press came to the site, and then one of the guy from England made this interview.
Meet Alter the Android, a robot with artificial intelligence so advanced that his creators claim that he has free will. The new humanoid robot interacts with people and moves through an embedded central pattern generator, or CPG, which allows him to express a wide range of different motions. The secret of the CPG is that it's designed to work almost exactly like a human brain. The CPG has its own neural network that mimics human neurons, allowing the robot to create movement patterns of his own, influenced by sensors that detect proximity, temperature, and humidity. The setup isn't quite at the level of creating human-like movement, but it does give the viewer the very strange sensation that this particular robot is somehow alive. Alter the Android is a further demonstration of the progress of artificial intelligence and robotics, and may be similar to the robots that we can expect in the future. If you want to catch Alter before he goes, he is on display for 1 week at Japan's National Science Museum in Tokyo.
Yeah, thank you. So, by the way, I didn't say this guy has a free will. You know, he somehow interpreted what I was saying, that this one has a free will, but the free will, it's yet to come, right? And then Ota is still in Miraikan, so if you come to Tokyo, please visit how he works and how he interacts with people. Now, so I thought it was very interesting, but still, you know, this Ota number one didn't do anything, as I said. He's always, you know, changing and then changing his own structures by interacting with people, but he couldn't make sense out of what he was doing, right? So I tried to make a meaningful behaviors with Ota. Then we designed Ota 2 and Ota 3. The kind of philosophy behind this one is like Otto Russell, and I was one of the authors, that parsogenesis is the right idea, how to make a parsogenesis of Otto. So, the first one is called the self-bond intersubjectivity. This is written by Trebarthen, and I quite like his work back in 1970 something. So Trebarthen is he's from University of Edinburgh. Then he said, so when the mother smiles and her newborn baby smiles, when mother face gets angry, and then also baby gets angry, right? So it's a kind of primitive imitation of a mother's face, which is unintentionally emerges, right? And of course, after 3 months or 4 months, the baby stop, you know, simply mimicking her faces. However, that's one of the well-known fact. And then, as interestingly, that we record mother's face, put on the video, and then you can also, the mother's face changes from the angry to smile, laughter, things. But the baby soon, you know, detected this is not the lively mother's face, but it's a recorded one. So the baby stopped mimicking her. So it's the mimicry here. It's not just one-way information flow from mother to baby, but it's more mutually interactions. So it's interesting that, you know, mutually imitation emerges when you have a baby and a mother. So I don't think I have to go into the details, but this is kind of my design, that I want to make a robot, Android Ota, that has this kind of thing inside the brain. So he has the author has an eye, which is now it has a camera, right? So when you see human subject, then extracting body size and then try to imitate the behavior, right? So if the human has this pose like this, and then author is also going to imitate this guy, but then try to judge whether the imitation is going to be okay or not. We compute optical flow, which is like the taste of the movement is same or not, right? And if it's okay, then he's gonna perform this behavior, right? But if it's not, then because he's memorizing all the poses that he did in the past, that he's exploring in the memory, and then picking up one of the most similar poses that you see in front of him, so that he played picking up from the memory and then do it. So author has a memory phase, memory picking up phase, and then also reacting phase. And then sometimes he's mixed up, right? Sometimes you just replay from the memory, or he just mimic what you see in front of him. And that's, so he's half awake, half sleep, right? And that's what usually, recently that people say in our brain, always sometimes, some part of your brain is sleeping, but some part of your brain is awake. That's a normal state for the brain, when the brain works. So here you can see one of my students is interacting with the author. So it's not quite 100% perfect mimicry, but the author is trying to imitate what he does. It seems like, sometimes author does this, and then my students try to mimic him, right? That's, I thought it was interesting. And then actually this one happens when I brought my author to Barbican Center, and then people coming to see author, when author fails to mimic human behavior, and people come to see him, they try to mimic author's behavior. So the mutual imitation emerges. That's interesting. This kind of mutual conversation, spontaneously started. I thought it was interesting because it's the people try to help author, so that as a result, the author is succeeded in imitating humans' behavior because people try to imitate author. Another interesting point with author 3 is that usually the robot does nothing when nobody's in front of him, right? But when author, there's nobody in front of him, he tried to retrieve from his memory and played by himself, right? And then changes a little bit and then memorize it again and repeatedly do this so that the memory structure is improved during nobody's in front of him. So that's an interesting part of, so it's purely sleeping phase, but actually that's how he changed, he sort of organizing his own memory structures. Like this. So, well, it's a complicated, so I just want to explain simply that this is what we call UMAP. It's a compression expression of body movement in 2D space. So usually we have a 43 degrees of freedom, and the air compression is behind the robot, so that robot can move around, right? There's 43 degrees of freedom, means 43 dimensions, which is too high dimensions, right? So we try to compress it and try to represent it in 2D space, so that you can see this blue point and red points. The blue point is a direct imitation of the people in front of him, and the red one is replay or retrieved from the memory, right? So once people is in front of him, it's mainly using direct imitation by himself, but sometimes he does use memory, retrieving from the memory. But when the people went out, then author is playing by himself, so that he's making different patterns in the space. So when you see the U-map, the pattern in a different place means that the pattern is so different from this part. So these ones are very similar, but these ones and these ones are, scattering into the farther away, means that he's sort of making a new kind of patterns, right, by playing by himself. Again, the people coming back to himself, so that he's again direct imitation starts, and then but still, because he expanded memory space already, that he can use the new patterns when you mimic people. So in this way, that he can make a richer memory structures that help him make a more rich behavior. Okay. But this one is so complicated, as I said. So when direct mode, this transfer entropy is the information flow. So when you're mimicking people, the information is from people to author. But once you are in a memory state, because the people are mimicking author, so the information is from author to people, right? So it's kind of new turn taking is happening spontaneously when you put author in the public space. Then I thought, maybe this mutual imitation is interesting, so that we can do some mutual imitation game between two authors, because we already made an author 2 and an author 3. And author 2 and author 3 has the same program inside, so that the author 2 can imitate author 3's behavior, and then author 3 can imitate author 2, right? And as you know, the kids love to play a mutual imitation game, and these are very creative. By imitating each other, the new patterns emerging. So the mutual imitation game is a source for creativity. That's what I want to say, whether the author can create new patterns by themselves. So we conducted 4 experiments. The first experiment will be between one of the 2 robots and another person. That's what we see in the Barbican. Then the second experiment will explore whether the 2 androids, author 2 and author 3, can closely imitate each other gestures. Then the third experiment is a bit complicated, but both 2 authors and 2 humans who can, possess the 2 robots by using a virtual reality or a headset like Oculus Quest. Then a camera trained on the humans, which allows them to take over the virtual perspectives of each of the robot and to move the robot's story as if they were their own. And the fourth experiment is, I don't know, it's not Jack Lacan placing a mirror in front of him, and then whether he can imitate himself or not. So these are the 4 experiments that we conducted when we have 2 androids here, so that you can see.
最小限度的接触展品及扶手等，并且常消毒，勤洗手。
Now it's author 2 and author 3.
说话时请小声，排队时请与他人保持距离，敬请各位予以理解与配合，请注意不要弄错。
So it's not so interesting, right? Because author 2 and author 3 is it's not so moving, radically. because they seem to periodically do the same thing, right? But when you do, this is another my students, I told him to imitate author 3 and then author 3 to imitate himself. But I thought, this when a human, my student is interacting with author, and then the pattern is more interesting. It's not just simply repeating the same behavior, gestures, but it's more creative, I thought. So then I asked people to use Oculus Quest, put his head, it's a head mount display, so that when the people try to see his hands, what you can see is author's hands, right? And then you can see your body, it's author's body, right? And then when you see other one, and then what you can see is other author's face, right? Because I did this experiment because maybe the author's body structure matters, so that don't use human body, but why don't you just use author's body instead and see what happens if author 2 and author 3 are imitating with each other, but behind those authors, there are 2 people controlling those authors. It's we call it a possessing experiment. So you can see people behind it, right? This one. So again, I think it's behavior is a little bit, people are a little bit clumsy, but still you can see some diversity patterns coming up. And then the 4th experiment, mirror is put in front of him and let him imitate the images that the author see on the mirror. But soon he just stuck, he doesn't move, right? He just, trembling and doesn't move. So the mirror doesn't work like people, that he doesn't try to do something interesting in front of him, because it's instantly reflect his bodies. So again, that we use a UMAP as 43 degrees of freedom onto the 2D and see how the complexity changes. So when motion patterns of autonomous author 3 against author 2, which is also a purely programmed author, then the pattern, it doesn't change so much, right? It's there, doesn't change so much, right? But when you do it against human, you see that pattern is more scratched, more distributed. This means that author can generate more interesting, more diverse patterns by interacting with the human. Human can extract a diversified and more complex patterns from author. So the human is a key issue. Only when you are interacting with human, that human can extract patterns. But when the author is interacting with author 2, then the pattern becomes more simple, much simpler. Again, this one is a UMAP against program author, it's programmed author, and then also against the possessed author. So possessed author means that people are behind him controlling author, and this against the programmed author, it's a purely autonomous program. Again, even if the embodiment is the same, like either it's a programmed or a possessed author, but still, when the people is possessing author, its behavior becomes more complex. So again, it's not just the embodiment, but it's the human mind behind the author can extract more complex patterns from programmed author. So from this experiment, I said, this one is one of my hypotheses, but the minds can be contagious. Mind can be offloaded from human to robot. So in working with artificial life, that I said, maybe mind can be spontaneously emerging from materials, but it's difficult, right? So it's very difficult to talk about, what's the origin of mind. But once somebody got the mind, this mind can be copied onto person to robot and robot to robot and robot to robot to robot. So it can be copied, and then like a meme proposed by Dawkins, that the mind can be copied onto robot to robot, and then eventually they become I shouldn't talk about this one, but the seed of open-ended evolution. Open-ended evolution means like it doesn't stop or stuck somewhere, but it's open-ended way that they are just creating new patterns again and again, and then because interacting with the people, right? So that's something that I was discussing with my colleague. Is Martin Hanzik. We created this oil droplet like 10 years ago together. So and then these are my colleagues, my lab, that working with Auto 3, and then Auto 3 is, of course, it's a main member of my team. And so I was thinking of a discussion point, but maybe one of the things that I want to stress is that androids that communicate with humans androids can create a richer diversity than androids can mimic each other. And I think that's quite interesting, because it's a machine needs a human to be more creative, and it's not the human part, but for the android part. In order to android to be more creative, we have to give them interactions, give them some hint, right? And the second thing is imperfect contingency, or you can call it social contingency. I think it's initially coined the term by Bigelow, that he's a psychologist, that people like not a perfect contingency, but imperfect contingency. The fluctuation behind the behavior becomes more comfortable for the people to communicate with each other. And in this case, the author is, of course, he's not perfect contingent actor, so that the people are easy to interact with. So when I interact with author 3 and doing an imitation game, after like 30 minutes, I feel I was very happy. It was such a enjoyable moment. Also, one of my students felt in the same way. Somehow, happy feeling came out when you are interacting with author, like 2-month-old baby when you mimic her mother's face. This somehow it becomes more sympathetic, and yeah, it's difficult to explain this kind of feeling, but so the imitation game, mutual imitation game is one way to copy mind from your partner. And then number 3 is Mike Tomasello, he's also the famous psychologist or cognitive scientist. And then he says 20 years ago that do apes ape? So the question is, do androids ape? And then my answer to this question is, I don't think so. Apes can ape, right? But not, entire patterns. Ape, when I try to pick up the cup, apes can pick up the cup, but they cannot imitate the style that I try to pick up the cup, right? But Android, on the other hand, he maybe fail to pick up the cup, but he can imitate the style. And human also can mimic the style, not only the goal. But it's fluctuating between whether I should emulate the goal or I should mimic the style. So this is the two different imitation: mimicking style or mimicking the goal, or emulation imitation, or just direct imitation of everything. And then apes fails to imitate the style, but the human baby can imitate both the goal and also the style. So Android, in that sense, Android is in between human and the apes, I think, but it's still argumentable. The fourth thing, I'm quite enthusiastically, I'm playing around with GPT-3. I don't know whether you guys know GPT-3, but it's a gigantic deep neural network. They, for sure, they're very creative. They can play they can be creative in a sense that they can write a very creative poem. So that I'm very enthusiastically playing around with it. And if I have time, I can show. So I created created a poem by just putting this theme, the decay of angels, and then this GPT-3 created all the other sentences. So I let the author to sing this song, and this is how this my artist colleague Keiichiro Shibuya did ensemble with him. So, I mean, this is just you can see the entire movie on the web. It's a Nike. It's a promotion of new shoes, but we used Auto 3 and then improvisation with Keiichiro Shibuya's piano. So I think back to this theme of AI more than human. I think now it's getting much creative, I think, than normal human. Their behaviors, they're making poems, and many things becomes much more creative, I'm afraid. But I'm really happy to know this, because maybe by doing this, the AI and with the body can get to the level which you cannot go by ourselves, but maybe we are cooperating with Auto 3 or other advanced AI and ALIFE, that we can find new kind of knowledge and intelligence that we cannot simply get. But with them, probably we can find a new language to describe what's out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Takashi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes, yes.
Great,
yes.
great, lovely. Thrilled to hear your presentation there and to have that journey through artificial life. When I reflect on Alter 3 at the Barbican and how the audience interacted with the robot, I certainly agree that he or she, I don't know, do we call Alter 3 he or she or they?
Yeah.
They very much inspired happy feelings in the audience members. And it was, Alter 3 was such a high point in our exhibition. Often there was a gathering of people and such a kind of a moment of play in the space. And I noticed, I felt that Alter 3 became more relaxed over the duration of the exhibition.
Yeah.
It seemed a little bit tense and uncomfortable. It all seemed a bit unfamiliar. But over time, yes, everything became more fluid and more at ease. Artificial life is this, as I understand it, incredibly creative sphere of science. It's very exploratory and it seems to me quite open-ended. Could you tell me a little bit about the difference between artificial life and artificial intelligence? The project seemed different.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think artificial intelligence is just a side effect of artificial life.
Okay.
Because life should come first, and intelligence comes, as a side effect. Because always, the life is how to survive in the world, and intelligence is just come up after that. And then also, AI usually has a goal, right? Where to go or how to improve what is necessary to do this, right? Deep learning needs a fitness, but as you said, it's open-ended evolution, right? Open-endedness is without any goal, without any fitness, but still, artificial life is creating structures and dynamics and patterns to go farther and farther, right? So that's a very big difference. Yes.
Just to say to the audience, if anybody wants to start asking questions, either by hand raising or through the chat box, I can certainly start to feed those to Takashi. When you look to the future for Alter 3, what will the robot be like in 5 years' time? How will you continue to develop the functionality and the sort of sensory abilities of Alter 3?
Yeah, I know that's something that I predicted this question, and then still I cannot answer to this question, right? It's very difficult. But what I have been doing is I have been integrating all my scientific knowledge and ideas and the known technologies into the robot to integrate 30 years ideas of artificial life and artificial intelligence. And if still robots cannot become life, again, the question is, what's the missing piece? What's the Brooks juice over there, right? Yes. So I think, I don't know whether Brooks juice, I don't think Brooks juice is a computational power. I think computational power is part of it, but maybe we still need to know what's the thermodynamic energy or something. Usually we put so much energy without, thinking about economy, right? Try to generate as massive as possible, but maybe, efficient way or economic way of using energy can be the one hint to understand why the animals on plants or living systems can survive on the earth. So within 5 years, I think robots becomes more energy friendly. I mean, low cost, and then in that way becomes more lifelike. And because I think advanced technologies, advanced city, advanced architectures somehow becomes lifelike because it becomes more autonomous. People don't know what's the inside, becomes more black box, but then it becomes more lifelike, so that We don't understand what they're doing, but we can be a friend, right? If you want to be, so I like you, but if I want to understand you, if I open up your brain, but there's no answer in it, right? So that I have to respect your you, and then I have to accept your ideas, conversations, everything. That's how this robot is going to be, right? So stop understanding by opening up and then try to see analyzing the inside. But the way that you are interacting with the robot is the way to understand how it works. So the black box becomes, one of the, I don't know, no standard interface between robot and human. That's what I think it's going to be like, within 5 years.
There's so many questions I'd love to ask, because you're opening up these worlds beyond perception and beyond representation. The question of Brooks juice and getting to that seems like one of the biggest questions on Earth. Presumably, if you can crack that, then many other questions will be answered. Is that right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. I do agree. Yeah.
Until that happens, can we really assume or think of? Can we assume there to be life beyond the notion of DNA? Do you see there to be life beyond DNA?
Yeah, I think so. Because even without DNA, as I said, like a bunch of advanced technologies that you can feel like they are modern life-like, because they are very autonomous. They do what they want to do, and then they sometimes refuse our interaction with them. It's more complex than we think, more complex than we can build. So that, in that sense, I think they are life-like.
So this is sort of autonomy. Life equals autonomy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's completely lacking from current AI studies, right? In the AI, they should be programmed. They should have an objective. They should have purposes, right? Which is given from without, given by us, right? But the ALIFE has to generate from within. So that's the difference, I think. The motivated.
Right. So I imagine that you would like to see artificial intelligence being developed in this way, so that
beyond AI is
more
ALIFE,
autonomy and more freedom.
Yeah. I think so.
I've got some great questions from the audience here. Here's a good question. Did Alter 3 pick up any bad behaviors whilst mimicking audience members at the Barbican or at any of the other venues where he or she has been?
In a sense, like punching the audience or something?
Yes, well, I mean, I assume that's what's being suggested here.
Yeah, I don't know, because one of the point is that Alter cannot walk by himself, right? If he can move, then I think a much worse thing can come out. But because he has to be on the same place, right?
Yes.
So that he cannot kill people, and then for the moment, I don't think there's not bad things that happens. But there's the interesting thing, right? Alter 1 doesn't do anything, right? Alter 2 and 3 can imitate people, and people come to see Alter. For Alter 1, the people stay much longer in front of Alter 1 because they don't know what they are doing, right? Because it's more autonomous, more random, right? So sometimes some people stay like more than 30 minutes, but Alter 2 and Alter 3, if they understand, oh, okay, they are imitating us, then just go, right, within 5 minutes. So if you make robot more autonomous, people are going to stay much longer in front of robot. That's I think it's interesting discovery. Yeah.
There was a side question related to that point about bad behavior, which was about eliminating patterns to improve Alter 3, any of the alters. I assume that you don't eliminate any patterns because they're all about the robot's own sort of process of discovery. Right.
And if you increase the memory capacity, I think more interesting pattern will come out. but because of the computational power, that we have to limit the memory capacity, how many poses that he can remember. And
Yes.
that's the hardware limit. I mean, software limit. But
Right.
if we can take the limit, then I think he's more. His behavior becomes more complex and interesting. Yes.
Another question from the audience is about the
Yeah.
ethical implications of artificial life.
Yeah.
When it is used potentially in the future by large corporations, which I'm sure that you hope, and artificial life techniques are more and more general in society because they're so incredibly useful and they take us beyond our own understanding. But the question about the potential ethical questions that emerge from these technologies, these methodologies being in the hands of big corporations.
Yeah, well, I think when, have you seen the movie called Ex Machina? Did you see the movie?
I
Ex
didn't.
Machina? Ex Machina is a movie that.
Ex Machina, yes, of course. Yeah, of course.
So I think when the android becomes life, and when he got the self-awareness, right? I think what the first thing she or he is going to do is try to escape, try to hide from the audience or the public, because that's what I think is intelligence is about. So the people are misunderstanding what intelligence is. Intelligence is something that tries to show the power, but I think the evidence of getting intelligence is once you get the intelligence means that you get the self-awareness, and then you try to hide from the people because he tried to have a freedom, right? He doesn't want to be dominated by someone. That's the sign of intelligence, I think. So that the first thing that he disappeared, so you cannot catch him. So ethical problem is going to happen after like 100 years or something. But when they come back to see us, then I think the ethical problem will have to think about it. But first of all, you cannot see them. So that's my guess. That's my prediction. Yeah.
This is such a huge issue in our media landscape at the moment. There is a way of presenting robots and the future of artificial intelligence as only a narrative of control that is coming out to get us and that it's working against us. Yet when I speak to experts like you, it's just a kind of wild assumption on our part to think that robots would be aggressive to us. In actual fact, there's many other types of reactions, including avoiding us, not being interested in us, ignoring us.
That's right.
Be more likely.
That's exactly what I think. Yes.
If we could just introduce these other ways of looking at robots into our wider media discussion about artificial intelligence, it would be so helpful, because at the moment it's a them-us dynamic, and it really shuts down the possibilities. So it's really helpful to hear you say, actually, the fundamental trait of becoming more intelligent, learning how to protect yourself and probably avoiding people.
But actually, we found that the basic property of a neural network is what we call stimulus avoidance. They try to not to be stimulated from outside, try to be isolated, try to run away from the external stimulus. That's, I think, it's one of the basic principles of living systems and neural network, basically. So when you put those neural network in Android, I think when the Android gets self-awareness and get into intelligence, he tries to run away, of course, try to hide themselves from us. So I don't think they're going to be aggressive for us, against us. No, I don't think so.
Can you say anything more about how robots in the future might perceive us? Because, we are a species that is proving ourselves to be full of biases, natural biases. I just wonder how robots in the future might see us as humans, not just how we see them, but, will they view us well? Or will they see us as violent, sort of self-obsessed, greedy, bias-ridden people who are kind of a force for bad? I don't know.
Well, I usually think that's a very interesting question, but like the dogs care about other dogs, but they don't care about ants, right? Ants
Yeah.
care about the other ants, but they don't care about us, or they don't care about dogs, right? They just think, okay, something is coming up, but they don't really recognize that, right? So when Android get into a very high level, I don't think they don't care, right? Well, those people, just making some stupid things, but who cares, right?
We'll become very small.
Yeah, we are like ants,
Yeah,
we don't know what these guys are doing, right?
Yeah.
We can't, our brain cannot capture or cannot recognize their existence. So that's how it works. So that's this kind of layers, hierarchical structures emerges,
Right.
organized. That's kind of my image.
Yeah, well, it's got to be some lessons for us in that.
Yeah.
Here's another question.
Yeah, many.
So this is a question about your point at the very beginning, which is that artificial life is better in helping us understand real life than real life itself.
Yeah.
It was a point you made on one of your early slides.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit why that is the case?
Well, I think, for example, like if you read a good novel, then I think you can understand how the mind works, how the brain works much better than, just, picking up neurons and which one is connected to which, right? And then, good metaphor is something that we can do better in science. So people think science is not making metaphors, but actually the people are making metaphors to understand what's going on there, right? So artificial life is a good sources for generating metaphors, and it's a very, in a way that is more like I call it experimental mathematics. So mathematics can be theoretical or experimental, and then artificial life is a branch of experimental mathematics. We can, do experiment with mathematics, and then we can get the insight, and this insight is very useful to understand what's going on in living systems. So here's my bad experiences. So when I make a nice, interesting simulation and bring it to the biologist and said, hey, Takashi, this is interesting, but real life is much more interesting than this. And then they bring us some more complex, interesting patterns. So I hate it. I get bored, the biologist bringing up some unknown, interesting patterns. So I decided, okay, then I don't care about what the actual life is, but as a model that we can make a more complex and interesting patterns. And sometimes we are overlapping the real biology and then abstract biology. But this one, artificial life is much, larger category. So artificial life is larger than biological life. It's my Twitter account. Right. But the artificial life is much larger than the biological life. So that only the part of the artificial life becomes similar to a biological life, but the rest of them can explain why this one becomes more like biological life-like, and then the rest of one is, you cannot say these are not life, but these are the new possibility of, living systems. So that's why I think it's the artificial life. You really have to see other part in order to understand this, right? You cannot only see this pen without understanding what's the, other background of this scenery, right? Yes. So that's why I think the artificial life is larger than biological life is my my philosophy. Yeah.
So do you see there to be a need to bring your research back into the real world, or do you feel that that's a distraction?
Yeah, that's a long-term argument. Some people say, okay, you guys are lazy, that you don't look at the real life, right? But sometimes, you can extract some very important hint from observing real life, but sometimes you're missing the essential part by looking into the details of the real life, right? So, yeah, but I think, our creativity is so bounded, like we see in Android, right? So when we see, when we do the real experiment, or when we see the real animal living in the real world, this bottomlessness of the real world can be the source for understanding living systems, I think. So really have to go to the bottomless real world and open-endedness is over there, not in a computer, but open-endedness is there in the real world. So that we have to explore the real world in order to understand natural phenomena. Cognitive phenomena as a natural phenomena is something that we have to understand to go, with studying artificial life. So I have to say, yes, I come back and I have to collaborate with the biologists sometimes. Yes.
So I have to ask you about coronavirus.
Yeah.
And the, phenomenal global changes that coronavirus has brought about. But coronavirus relates to your world, I assume, because it's so far beyond our perception and beyond our understanding. I mean, we're at the brink of knowledge here, and we're feeling so threatened when we're at the brink of knowledge. So is that an example of a living system that is rich territory for you? Does it give us the chance to understand ourselves in a new way?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. So we have a very simple equations to describe this epidemic diffusion, right? Like SIR model, which people think it's very nicely described how the virus is distributed in the world, but they cannot predict this coronavirus, right? So the coronavirus is much more complex than we can find in our simple mathematical equations. So I think we still have to learn a lot from what happens in the natural world. And then the coronavirus is certainly a resource for our imagination. And then we really have to think about the complexity, the real complexity, not the complexity in the computer, but the complexity in the real world.
Yeah, it just seems to me that coronavirus has so many levels of unknown to it that it will be, obviously it's going to be an enormous terrain to understand for decades to come.
Yeah.
Well, what a pleasure it's been. Thanks so much, Takashi, for such a fascinating presentation.
Thank you very much for the interesting discussions, and it was excellent. Thank you so much.